Siddhartha. What can we learn from this book? I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Today we'll be talking about another somewhat philosophical topic. Last week we discussed free will and determinism, and today we'll be talking about some of the lessons that can be found in the book called Siddhartha. Why is this important? Well, we can all see how deranged politics has become these days. One reason for that, among many, might be that we lack foundational pillars that are supposed to supplant all of these political ideas that we're having. Unfortunately, it seems like we're not having those conversations or those moments to learn. Politics are built upon foundations. They don't come from nowhere. Things like philosophy, reasoning, science, all of these things build that underpinning. And from there, we can erect these structures of politics and ways about we go organizing our society. When the fundamental structures of that building, though, are not strong, are not fortified, it's no wonder that politics are crushing everything. Because, as a society, we lack the proper foundation to actually support everything. And even further than that, not just supporting, we lack the proper fundamentals to reject certain ideas or produce proper arguments as to why certain notions make no sense. That's why talking about some of these topics aside from politics directly is important. And today, we'll be talking about the book Siddhartha. It's rather old. I forget the exact year it came out, but very interesting. Now, at first glance, you might think it's a book on Buddhism. It's really not. There are Buddhist ideas in it, but it's more so about discovering truth for yourself. So, essentially, you have the main character, Siddhartha, and he realizes one day that life is far more complex than he's been taught. He's a high-class citizen in India, I believe. This is a time where the caste system was quite popular and he was at the top. The Brahmin class, he was a priest, and he starts to notice that the world he's experienced thus far isn't the totality of reality. There are many things out there that differ from his own experience, things that he can learn from. So, he tells his father that he's going to leave. And further, he's going to leave to essentially become a nomad, a wanderer. Now, he comes from a rather affluent family. They weren't too thrilled to hear about that. They would much rather he remain in the comfort of their familial setting, but he was determined to seek out knowledge and really understand what the world is. Not just through his currently narrow perspective, but a more inclusive way of seeing things, a more holistic view. So, he does just that. He will eventually convince his father to give him a blessing to take on this journey, and he does become that nomad, living in the forest, essentially living off the land and begging. Now, that's a stark difference from where he was a couple weeks ago. At the beginning of his journey, he left the comfort of the highest class in Indian political economic landscapes during that time. Now he's become a wanderer with no possessions. Quite the different perspective there. Quite the different lifestyle, and there were many lessons that he learned from that. But eventually he gets to a point where the same thing happens to him. He realizes that he's learned all he could here. This also is not the totality of what the world can offer him. He's been at the top, maybe now he's been at the bottom. What else is there? There's so much nuance in the middle, all these layers of living, so he moves on again. At some point he begins to wonder, what is it that he's actually doing? Fundamentally, he's seeking enlightenment. He's trying to understand the world for all it is. He's trying to figure out how to attain the wisdom to truly embrace reality. And along his journey, after he's left the nomads, he meets a Buddha who has done just that. He's revered as someone who has reached enlightenment. He has hundreds of followers. And Siddhartha meets him. And they converse, and the Buddha offers to take him as a student. In a way, the Buddha is saying, I'll teach you everything that I know. I have reached enlightenment. Here, follow me, and you can do the same. Now, interestingly enough, Siddhartha turns that down. He says, no thank you. He says he admires where this Buddha is. He recognizes the path that he's taken to get there, but one of the foundational pillars of Siddhartha's philosophy is that wisdom can't be shared like that. Knowledge, yes, you can. You can teach him which fruits are good to eat, which ones are not, but true wisdom, that comes from experience, and it's not as if there's only one path to enlightenment. What worked for the Buddha is not guaranteed to work for him. He'd much rather go through life and figure things out on his own terms. He found this as something of an easy way out, to be handed the answer manual. Well, first of all, he doesn't know that the answers will work for him. And second, it's his life and his journey. He takes ownership and responsibility for that and says, I'll figure things out. Now, Siddhartha did have a counterpart during the journey, a best friend who came with him, and here his best friend got taken away. The friend was amazed with the Buddha, and he remained with him to learn and study in the hopes of one day reaching a similar plateau as him. So that was the first loss, really, that Siddhartha experienced that impacted him, losing his riches and his wealth, becoming a nomad. That was a loss in a sense, but he didn't really care about that. This was a more foundational loss to him, having to continue on his journey without his friend, having to decide for himself which path he wanted to walk, and he wasn't angry at his friend. He said, it's good that you become a man. You're making choices for yourself now. At the beginning of our journey, you simply just followed me and took my lead. Now you're choosing to remain with the Buddha and follow that path. He applauded him, but he also said it's not for me. So he moves on to the next phase of his journey. Here he reaches a more populous city. He's no longer among the Brahmin. He is no longer a nomad. He's left the Buddhist and the monks who followed him. And now he comes across a woman who he really likes. She catches his eye. Eventually, he gets her to show him what love is, what emotion is, what compassion feels like, and other notions as well that we don't have to talk about relating to pleasure and stuff like that. More learning. Things that, once again, we see here the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Of course, someone can tell you how to do certain things, but to actually go through it, though, there's a different level of learning there, of wisdom. People can give you advice on how to talk to a girl and fall in love and whatever, but you don't know, first of all, if that's going to work for you. You're a unique individual. And second, you can have all the advice in the world and you might still suck at doing these things. You get better through practice and experience, and that's exactly what he's done here. So, after that, he stays in the city with the woman. He doesn't fully understand how to grow attached, though. That's one of the foundational pillars of Buddhism that he's taken to heart. Or maybe further than that, it's a part of him. He can't really commit. He's not interested in just being with her, but he's interested in the feelings that arise when he is with her. So he won't commit. He won't put a ring on it, in other words, but, they'll still enjoy each other's presence, and she's kind of the same as him in that regard. At his next point, he actually meets a merchant. Siddhartha meets him, and he gets taken under the merchant's wing. He shows him how to become rich, how to gain material wealth, and Siddhartha does amazingly well at this. At the beginning, he's so good at business because he's able to detach emotion from things. He thinks about everything rationally, and he tries to make the best decisions possible without the undue influence of emotions. He is dispassionate, and as a result, he becomes extremely wealthy. But here a form of corruption occurs. He becomes wealthy, and it gets to his head. He starts to place tremendous value on material possessions. He starts to hoard wealth. He starts to indulge in alcohol and things that he never did before. Prostitutes, I believe, were mentioned. Strippers, drugs, everything. He becomes engulfed in it. Now, the funny thing to him, after reflecting on this, is that he's gained a desire or a craving for things that he never wanted before. It's almost as if that once you give in to this realm of material desire, it puts a void in your heart. And you do all these things to try and fill it, but nothing fills it. That's how he felt. He felt extremely empty, more empty than he's ever been. Now, he was the richest he's ever been. He had the most things that he's ever had, but still, at the same time, he had nothing. All he had was that hole in his heart. A desire for something, but he couldn't fill it. No matter how much money he made, how much property he had, how many girls he had, whatever. Nothing was working for him. And it actually drove him to madness at some point. He regarded the common man, the common merchant, as childlike at the beginning of his journey. People who were caught up in the worldly desires of the earth and who weren't doing what he thought was the ultimate goal, seeking this form of enlightenment. But here he was getting caught up in it, and it actually humbled him. It's an important lesson. It's easy to look down on people when you have not experienced or conceptualized the things they've gone through. So here he is going through that same thing, and the exact outcome that he chastised them for has become his reality. He has become childlike himself, obsessed with the toys and the gadgets of the world and whatnot. And it actually makes him feel so bad that he tosses it all away. And this is actually happening quite late in his journey. So he left his father's house when he was like 10 or 12 or something. Now he's like 60. And he abandons everything one day. He says that my initial mission was to understand the world. And I've lingered here for far too long. I've been drawn in by whatever it is, the attractiveness of this type of lifestyle. And it has done nothing for me. And there is some truth to that, really, even in today's world. The pursuit of acquiring wealth, or even further, the pursuit of happiness in and of itself, it'll lead you to the same point that Siddhartha was at, where you just feel empty. So he tossed that away, and he finds himself near a river, and he's so depressed about wasting all of those years, not really having anything to show for it, having forgotten about his journey, having lost a lot of his previous knowledge and wisdom, that he contemplates killing himself. And at this point, he has a reawakening. In a sense, it begins to dawn on him that it truly was not a waste of time. It actually was just experience, and experience that's going to help him develop, help complete his picture. Now, one of his original goals and the reasons why he left his father's house was because he didn't understand the world. He only understood the Brahmin perspective of it, the upper caste in the society. He became the nomad. He mingled with the Buddhist and the monks, then he mingled with the girl he loved, and then he became a merchant. Now, he does feel bad about the merchant part, because he stooped to new lows and he was taken in by the depravity that might come with that occupation and whatnot. But still, now he understands those merchants. Now he understands those nomads. Now he understands the Buddha. He kind of understands where that girl's coming from, the one he's been mingling with. He understands the Brahmins, and he's beginning to fill in the voids in his imagination. The ways in which you can conceptualize the world, it became clearer to him. So he began to change the way he viewed that, and it gave him motivation to go on. He reached peace with it. You know, this is a lesson. Even though a terrible thing can happen, you can feel like you've wasted your time or your days or your efforts or whatever, there is a silver lining to be found there. It did teach you something. Now he moves on to the next part of his journey, and here he just becomes a ferry usher. So there's a river, and I assume there's like a wooden boat that he rides back and forth, transporting people. Here he becomes comfortable, and there's another individual there who's very smart, who he ends up living with, and he's learning from him. He feels like he's getting closer to that enlightenment. And here, turmoil strikes again, another lesson. You can feel very comfortable, but you never know when tragedy will arise. Now, that old lover that he left behind in the city, she actually had his son, and they're traveling one day, coming close to where Siddhartha currently resides, but they don't know it. Now, his old lover ends up getting bitten by a snake, and he sees her while she's dying, like laying down with the child. The child's yelling, calling for help. So he takes her back to his hut, and it becomes clear to him that she's a goner. She won't make it through this. Of course, that's traumatic to him. But there's also the duality of that, where he sees this child and it becomes clear to him. Well, before she dies, she tells him that it's his child, it's his son. So he's happy about that. A new experience has just become evident to him. But at the same time, his lover is passing away, and she does in fact pass away. So, turmoil. His whole world got flipped upside down. He thought he was getting closer, but now he's been drawn back, pulled back down to reality. Now he has this unexpected responsibility of raising the child, and the child does not quite enjoy being in his presence. So his mother was quite wealthy. He lived a good life, but now he's forced to live essentially in poverty, with Siddhartha living in a hut And they're talking about like things like rice are a luxury to them in this current state. It's not entirely good, and the child does not like this, and he causes many issues for Siddhartha. Siddhartha was very detached. That was one of his prime philosophies, and here we see another lesson. Your pillars can be shaken. He starts to become extremely attached to the child, attached in ways he's never been before to anything, and that's understandable. Now, the child continues to cause problems for him, just not a pleasant entity to live with. And even Siddhartha's partner, who is very calm, who is on his way to enlightenment as well, begins to tell him that you're forcing this child to live with you in a selfish manner, almost. This is no world for him. You guys have conflicting goals here, conflicting environments, and eventually the child runs away. And he goes off on his own journey to build a world or build an environment that he wants to live in. And Siddhartha is torn up about this. He's so sad. He is depressed. He goes looking for him. He's acting in ways which you would have never imagined him doing so before. And I will talk about more so the lessons that come from that. There's some irony there. You might have picked up on it. The way Siddhartha's child treated him and the way Siddhartha treated his father. Now, at the end of all these experiences, he's gone through the demise of his loved one, his child running away from him, him feeling like he's wasted so many years, him becoming a nomad, meeting a Buddha, everything, the totality of his life. Near the end of it, he does reach a universal understanding of the world by feeling that there is a oneness here. He becomes at peace because he begins to realize that although it may have felt that he's been moving in circles, going from steady to new to distraught, to steady to new to distraught territory over and over again, it hasn't really been a circle. It's been something like a spiral. He's been going up levels throughout each experiment, throughout each experience, and further than that, he begins to realize that everything is truly connected. You have the young Siddhartha, the middle-aged Siddhartha, the old Siddhartha. It's all just Siddhartha. And you can actually apply that theory to the world too. The old world, the new world, the inhabitants of the world. You're all just the world, really. And he begins to see himself in everything. He begins to realize that he's not so different from these other people. He begins to realize that the past, the present, and the future truly can all be amalgamated into the single entity that you are now. You're a combination of things that have happened in the past, and you represent the present, but you also hold the potential for the future, all at the same time. And that's very interesting to him. And it puts him at ease. It allows him to see that the true reality of the world is one of connectivity, not one truly of isolation, not one truly of unsurmountable sorrow. He's gone through crazy things in his life, but he's able to get past that and see that it's all part of the journey. His journey is unique, and it's brought him to where he wants to be. So he's okay with that. It is not so much so that the world is perfect, but he's learned to appreciate it for what it is. He's learned to appreciate his place in it and his relationship to all other things. And now I want to talk about some lessons here. One of the core things that I found interesting was that there really is no single path to enlightenment or to knowledge or to wisdom or to whatever, to your end state. There are multiple ways to get to different places. Now, Siddhartha ended up becoming enlightened. His best friend also did. There was that Buddha he met. All these people. And they all got to it at different ways. Now, the Buddha that he met, it wasn't truly clear how he got there, but his best friend got there from following his example. Siddhartha got there by uncovering the truth of the world for himself, by experiencing all of these things. Now, as a person living in today's world, it might feel like you've gone off path, especially if you've deviated from the traditional norms or what people are expecting of you. But it doesn't mean that you are lost. It doesn't mean that you aren't going somewhere amazing. Everyone has their own path. It's a question of what you make of it. You can go through complete crap. You can have the worst experiences. What are you going to make of it? Are you going to do as Siddhartha did or not? Then, the other thing that came up here, was that tragedy will find you. There's no doubt there. It found Siddhartha many times. But how it affects you, though, that you can influence. Of course, you'll be distraught naturally. But what are you going to do with it? It's similar to the first lesson here. It's what are you going to do with it? That's the question. How are you going to interact with it? Are you going to learn from it? Or are you going to let it get you down? Now, Siddhartha did both. He let it get him down. He contemplated suicide, but after that, he decided to do something better, more productive with these losses he experienced. He learned from it. It got him to a better point to prepare him for the future. This is a mindset worth cultivating. You should not be babied or confuse yourself into thinking that you will never face tragedy or turmoil or be challenged or feel uncomfortable or feel like you have a certain right to not be triggered or something like that. That's not true, and if you do believe that, well, the world will have a cruel surprise for you at some point. Instead, it's better for you to acclimatize yourself to that environment, to theorize about it, and to learn how you might respond best when faced with the realities of that. Something we seem to have strayed away from today. Now, the third thing that I found interesting there was something of the cyclical relationship between parents and children. This narrative played itself out so many times. So, as a parent, actually, maybe we should start with as a child. That's the beginning of the journey. As a child, it's normal to feel very rebellious, to not appreciate what your parents have done for you, to not understand the sacrifice there, and to simply think about yourself and what you want to do, and to not take into account the consequences of your action on other people. Siddhartha demonstrated that by going to his father and his family and saying, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to run away. And it's like a 10-year-old. And that's what he did. He never contacted them again after. That's what he said. To him, he didn't truly understand the sorrow that would place on them. It was a very selfish thing to do in hindsight. And he did wish he would get in contact with them or at least visit them once in a while. That was their son who fled to pursue his destiny, sure. But you can do that in productive ways. Ways that don't totally sacrifice your past relations, and further, he may have acted like a brat here and there. Cause his family more heartbreak than necessary. Now, when he has his own child, and Siddhartha has become a matured man, and he can truly appreciate what has happened here. Now his child is doing the same thing to him. He is running away at like 10 years old. He's wreaking havoc. He's disturbing his father's life without really understanding it. And that's the thing. As a child, as a youth, you truly are ignorant. Why? Because you simply lack the experience that Siddhartha talked about. You have no wisdom at all. But it's hard to see that. You don't even have the wisdom to know you lack wisdom. So, now he's going through the turmoil that his father must have encountered, and he's appreciating that, and he's learning from it. It gives him a certain regard for this cycle of events here. I do think it's very applicable to us today once again. Try your best to treat your parents in a productive manner, in a good manner, and in a loving way. Because you set yourself up for a form of surprise when your own children are doing the things that you did to your parents, and now their children are going to do what they did to you, and it truly is a cycle there. It might be hard to break it, but you can try, especially if you're young. It's not too late. And now I'll close off with some quotes that I liked from the book. Here's the first one. When someone seeks, said Siddhartha, then it easily happens that his eyes see only the thing that he seeks, and he is able to find nothing, to take in nothing, because he always thinks only about the thing he is seeking, because he has one goal, because he is obsessed with his goal. Seeking means having a goal, but finding means being free, being open, having no goal. Now that is highly applicable to many things that we are seeing in politics today. You don't realize it. It's synonymous with confirmation bias. We are seeking many things out. We truly wish to be proven right, regardless of if we're sticking to the truth or not. We are finding things that perhaps may not need be found. Why? Because we're seeking. Because we have things in our mind that we are not able to move away from, that we are fixated on. The real goal, and the one thing that's worth fixating on, is something like the truth. Something that's flexible and will always capture the proper answer. To fixate on anything else but that is a mistake. To not be free, to not be open, to not even have a goal per se. It's interesting when you look at certain studies, certain debates, the goal of the person conducting the study or telling you their proposition is they want to prove their point right. What kind of goal is that? You should not even have that. Having no goal simply means seeking the truth, really. You're not invested in your own idea, nor the other person's, but you will let things play out. And you'll see what comes up. You'll be free to notice the correct answer. You let go of ideology. It's one thing worth considering. And finally, this does capture the totality of Siddhartha's experience. He says, I've always believed, and I still believe, that whatever good or bad fortune may come our way, we can always give it meaning and transform it into something of value. So as we talked about, good, bad, traumatic or not, you get to tell it what it means to you. It can influence you. It can have something that it's trying to say, but you can reject that. You can say, no, not today. You're going to be a source of growth for me. You're going to be a source of knowledge or wisdom. Here's what I'm going to make that experience mean. You can transform it into something. You can take something of seemingly no value, of negative value even, and you can give it something. You can make it mean something to you. There is a lesson in everything. It's a question of if you are willing to interpret it and if you are willing to find it. And there's also another point here about not feeling too bad about some of the tragedy that you see here, or the tragedy that you will experience, because it is somewhat inevitable. You will encounter misfortune. You can't control that. Do focus though on what you can control, because you are not totally powerless. You can control how you interpret it. And how are you going to get value? That is the question for you. So that now leads me to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.